Date for the Voice referendum will be revealed this week. It'll happen on Wednesday, and this will kick off the start of a 6-week campaign until Australia will finally have their decision. Well, they'll vote on October 14, it looks like. Joining me live now is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. It's really hard to see this being any other date now, isn't it, David?
Yeah, look, I think obviously with the Prime Minister going to the United States the week after, it's pretty obvious that he won't want to clash with football finals. Australians won't take kindly to that, so I suspect it's pretty well locked and loaded that the 14th of October is the date that we'll go to the polls on this question.
So what's going to happen here? We know what your position is. It looks to me that the Yes campaign is certainly narrowing its focus. Do you still think that you will prevail here?
Oh, look, taking nothing for granted, and since November last year when the Nationals got to our principal position, that if this was just about constitutional recognition, then we would support it. And sadly, the Prime Minister didn't take that opportunity. He's conflated it with what isn't a new model. It's a model, a representative model that we've had before, and it's failed rural and regional Australians. And so what we're saying is there is a better pathway to constitutional recognition. There is a proper way to do this. And unfortunately, I think regardless of the result, the Prime Minister will lose out of this. He's divided the country instead of bringing us together. He had an opportunity to actually isolate the question and to simply put about constitutional recognition. And I think that most Australians would support that. But this conflation of a representative body, a model we've had before, it's not new, it's not a new proposition, I think has divided our country. And unfortunately, the Prime Minister, regardless of the result, has failed our country in trying to unify it.
You talk about division coming from the push for Yes, but what about division, between you and Peter Dutton? You don't necessarily agree on a legislated voice. We don't see Warren Mundine and Jacinta Price necessarily agreeing on the direction. I mean, you all know you're not actually offering solutions, or are you going to get to that?
Well, we do offer solutions. If it was about constitutional recognition and a proper constitutional convention where all Australians got to say on what the question and the intent of the question being put to the Australian people was proposed, rather than just 250 Indigenous Australians getting to have that say. If there was a question about how do we close the gap, we actually do agree with that.
And that's the question,
this is about a 2023...
Closing the gap. Actually, nothing has worked so far. No. Nothing.
There are two... But doing the same thing as what we've done in the past won't work. But there is a better way to do this, Laura. No, it's not. This is where people in metropolitan Australia need to understand we are repeating the mistakes of the past. This is not a new proposition. This is a representative body. And what this means for us in rural and remote areas, it's hard for people in capital cities to get their heads around this. But you are going to have a representative that is covering hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of square kilometres, hundreds of different diverse communities. And what we are doing is falling into the trap of sending them back to Canberra and letting the bureaucracy to generalise and then to nationalise programs that are not fit for purpose in individual communities. Rather than getting the bureaucracy out of Canberra, we need a better bureaucracy, not a bigger one, taking the bureaucracy out of Canberra and sitting there and empowering local elders, because we know to the postcode where the challenges are and what the challenges are in closing the gap. And so that has been the tenet of what we've said, and we should have a forensic audit of the $4 billion that is being spent. There's a generosity of spirit and a generosity of financial support to close the gap. It's just that repeating the mistake of what we've done in the past, it will be us in rural and remote Australia that will miss it out again, rather than doing something different. And the Voice isn't something different, but what we could have done in unifying this country is asking us, do we believe Indigenous Australians were here first? We've made serious mistakes, but we are better having been together, and we will be better sticking together. I think that would have been a unifying moment. The Prime Minister let it go, and in fact, he's simply just divided the country.
What happens when this Voice let's say it is defeated? Let's say the Australian people say no on October 14. Is that the end of it?
No, there'll be no victory lap from the Nationals. Let me make that very clear. I'm very proud of the respectful tone in which we've handled this debate. The very first words that'll be uttered out of my mouth is that if the Prime Minister wanted to commit and recommit to constitutional recognition and undertake due process, there's no need to defer that any longer, to have a constitutional recognition, to get the question to the Australian people right, to give them that opportunity to unify this nation about constitutional recognition. We will be a constructive force in that. That's my responsibility as a political leader to be able to say that. With respect to closing the gap, what we'd be saying to this government is let's undertake that forensic audit. Let's actually empower local elders. Let's have a 2023 intervention, an intervention in Canberra with the bureaucracy and putting them out with these local elders. And if you go and spend time with these local elders, they can invariably solve the problems that we have in closing the gap in their local communities. But it's bespoke and it's local to that particular community. That is the leadership that Nationals are signing up to, but there'll be no victory lap. We want to be constructive in this. We've been constructive all the way.